to tonight's Lenscast podcast. We are talking photography. We are showing pictures. We are
I think for me, with every landscape photograph begins with a subject, and I don't see the wider landscape as the subject itself. The landscape is never the subject of the photograph; it's always something that's within the landscape. And I'm typically drawn to man-made features, be it old buildings or walls or anything like that. Really. Photography brings you closer to the things that you love, whatever that might be. And I love the outdoors and the natural world and walking, all that kind of thing. So I think it was inevitable that I was going to become a landscape photographer. And that's a really important element of composition. You really want to try to keep the eye within the frame. You don't want the eye wandering out. So you want to try and keep the edges of your frame as free from distractions, as free from things that are going to pull you away from the center. And if you have a journey or flow through your image, it helps if that flow is through the center of the image. The minute you become a photographer and you start to see the world through the eyes of a photographer, you can't go back. And we see the world in a different way to other people.
Good evening, guys. It's Landscape Lenscast podcast. We're here again with the usual suspects with Doug Milne, Louise Welcome, and Alistair MacDonald. And also, we've got a guest. It's Chris Sale. So Chris, of course,
Hello, everybody.
There we go. Thanks, Chris. And Chris, thanks again for just giving us your time to come on to our small little channel. We really appreciate that. So Chris Sale is a professional landscape photographer, and of course, he's a coach and mentor. And he specialises in helping landscape photographers take better pictures and also get more, of course, enjoyment from their photography. So he does a lot of kind of helping coaching people, does one-to-one workshops, etc. And he's a truly professional photographer. He sees work, which we'll show actually tonight. We'll put that on, some of his images, and we're looking forward to it, of course. So Chris, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to be here, Paul. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, great.
You too.
And Chris, just going to go back to pretty much where you started in photography. And it's a question that I always say it's been asked a million times in every podcast. But where did it start from? Where did the talent come from?
So I've been a photographer for about 18 years now, and I got married in 2006. It was I got married in 2006. So, and my wife and I, we spent a fortune on the wedding, and most of it went on the honeymoon. And I thought, well, maybe I ought to get a camera and capture this. We spent so much money on it. And so at the beginning of that year, we got married in August. So in January of that year, I walked into the Milton Keynes branch of Jessop's, and I said, I'm looking for a digital camera, and they said, well, the Canon 350D, if you remember those, Canon 350D is very popular. Yeah. I said, I'll have that one. And that was it. And I've been a Canon man ever since. And it was like the missing piece of the jigsaw. It was like finding out I was 30. In 2006, I was 32 when I started.
Okay.
So that tells you how old I'm going to be this year. And and it was as simple as that. It was like finding a missing piece of the jigsaw. And it didn't take me long. I mean, I'm like everybody, when they start off in photography, you take photographs of everything. And I did portraiture, I did sports, did macro. But it didn't take me long to figure out that landscapes was the thing that floated my boat. And I've never really done anything else. I've only ever really done landscapes ever since.
Yeah. And in regards to your images, of course, you've got a lot of different types of landscape photography. You don't stick to one genre, and there's so many now, as you probably know, as we looking through different photography through social media and also on YouTube and so forth. There's certain people who actually stick to one genre now. I kind of find that more and more, like Woodland and seascape, etc. But you do a bit more of everything. Like Louise, she does that as well, and a couple of guys here. What's your favourite type of image, and what's your location? What type of images are you looking to get, and what you look for in a landscape shot? What's the three fundamental things you look for?
So I think for me, with every landscape photograph begins with a subject, and I don't see the wider landscape as the subject itself. The landscape is never the subject of the photograph; it's always something that's within the landscape. And I'm typically drawn to man-made features, be it old buildings or walls or anything like that, really. So I shot for many years, probably for about 10 years. I photographed exclusively in the Lake District.
Yeah,
and the Lake District is perceived as being this beautiful natural landscape, but it's not natural in any way, shape, or form. It's entirely sculpted by the hand of man, and it's that symbiosis that kind of really inspired my photography. And I forget when it was. I should know, but we were awarded World Heritage status by UNESCO, and they made the observation is that synergy between man and nature that created this harmonious landscape, and that was something I was always kind of drawn to. And so it tends to be those kind of man-made elements within the landscape.
Yeah. That's interesting because a lot of people, like try to keep away from the man-made things. Like, normally some photographers will go on about trying to minimize anything that's man-made, and that's good that you embrace that. It's a different type of photography because so many people are so hung up of trying to make things look so natural. But it does give a bit of character to the image, I feel. Don't you think, guys?
I think so.
Yeah.
Go on, guys. Sure. What do you think?
I think you can actually provide an interesting juxtaposition. Where I tend to go is sort of, or I'm attracted to, similar places that, for example, of Chris. And actually, one of the things that first, forgive me for saying this on air, Chris, but one of the first reasons I picked up a camera is because of this man. And it's interesting as well because a couple of years later, and we're twins because I'm the same age as him. I'm very aware that some of the videos that I've seen with him where he struggles, I'm quite a number of years behind him, but having similar struggles. And I haven't quite got that blend, that synthesis that you have, but it's something I find very interesting. The walls, obviously I get, but I'm thinking sometimes you see photographers that really like to place a quite a stark human feature. I'm thinking sort of the James Popsis type thing, where you've got a very sort of industrial element within that. Yours, even though it's the human hand, it still synthesizes within your shot and doesn't have a harshness kind of breaking up against it as it can in others.
Yeah, I think that I think partly that is the landscape that I've worked in, and it is a particularly beautiful landscape, and therefore I think that there is a sensitivity with the way that people have adopted the land. But I run a gang of photographers. The guys that I coach on a regular basis, we meet a couple of times a month, and we do monthly challenges. And the challenge this month has been to photograph an eyesore and to photograph something that kind of stands out in the landscape. It feels out of place, and I've absolutely loved it. It's been fabulous exploring these different things, and obviously the majority of it's man-made. So it's been telecommunication towers and wind turbines and all this kind of stuff, and I've really enjoyed exploring that. That difference and the jarring that you get between the beautiful landscape and the kind of quite ugly man-made structures. Some of them you wonder, how on earth are they allowed to build that?
Yeah.
It probably depends how out of the way it is, of course. Telecommunications tower on the top of a hill, hardly anyone sees it really. You know, it's just in the distance. They'll get away with it.
Yeah.
I think.
Maybe.
Unless you're like you and me and actually hike to the top of the thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in regards to your images, what actually makes an image for Chris Sale? What kind of image do you look to get out there? What's the factors you look for?
So I'm a big one for. So one of the things I love about photography, you know, I can't remember who said it, but you know, photography brings you closer to the things that you love,
Mm-hmm.
whatever that might be. And I love the outdoors and the natural world and walking and all that kind of thing. So I think it was inevitable that I was going to become a landscape photographer. Other friends of mine are fans of motorsport, so inevitably that's what they've gone and photographed. So it's that you know, once you and you guys know, you know, the minute you become a photographer and you start to see the world through the eyes of a photographer, you can't go back. And we see the world in a different way to other people, and we see things that other people don't see. And I think that's a big part of it. As my style and as my approach has evolved, you know, I started doing, you know, what everybody does in landscape photography, I guess, in what we might refer to as the honeypot locations, or you know, these well-known scenes, and they're brilliant because you learn so much about composition. You understand, you know, how to put an image together. Once you've kind of got the hang of that, it's really up to you then to go off into the world and find your own stuff. And you know, for me, you know, there's got to be that connection with the subject. There's got to be that interest, and interest is, of course, the ultimate in subjectivity. But so, what interests me might not interest Dougie, might not interest Alistair, you know. But that's the beauty of photography, and that's you know, that's what I think we as photographers, you know, we have to do. That we have to, you know, there has to be an element of ourselves. So really, it's anything that I feel kind of strongly drawn to, or a connection to, whether it's the story behind it or the story that has been inferred, that you know, that I've picked up through my own feelings, emotions, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, and we will be looking at your work just now. So if you just bear with me now, just now, let's get that ready, and we'll have a little talk about your images and some fine images, guys, you will see on tonight's podcast. So brace yourself.
Oh God.
Ready for the cheese, everyone?
Here we go.
It's time for that part of the show on Landscape Lenscast podcast, where we all take a look at the images for this week from present and past.
So, just looking at the first image, come up on the screen, and of course, Chris, can you just introduce this image and tell us about where it was, and
Yes, this is in a village called Kirkoswald, which is down the road from where I live. It's actually where my doctor's surgery is, and the term, Dougie will know, the term Kirkoswald literally means the Church of St Oswald, because Kirk is a Northern English Scottish term for a church. And the interesting thing about you know, most churches in England, at least, you know, they'll have a bell tower attached to the church. But at Kirkoswald, they decided, for some reason, nobody seems to know why, but they separated the bell tower and put it on a hill next to the church. And so that's what this is. It's the bell tower at Kirkoswald Church in Kirkoswald, just down the road from where I live now. And that's what when I was talking earlier about the stories behind things and that connection that I have to them. It's that history, that why did they do that kind of draws me to a subject and compels me to have a stab at photographing.
Chris, is it bracketed, this picture? Because obviously you've got the
That's
sun
going to be my
behind it,
question.
so you would expect it to be more of a silhouette, you know.
Yes, it is. So it's I believe. So I shoot with a Canon 5 DSR, which by modern standards has got an average dynamic range, and so For a scene like this, where you're trying to keep detail in the highlights, but also reveal some detail in the shadows, I have to bracket. But it's not a big bracket. It's surprising. It's one stop either side, so it's not a big one.
Yeah.
I love the skeletal trees in the background. It just draws you down through there, and yes, it's
depth. Go on. Sorry.
Because it's just quite hypnotic, because you're sort of you don't quite know where to look, because you know that building is staggering, but God, that in the background is quite sublime.
Yeah.
So depth is a big part of what I try and do. I have three kind of aesthetic principles that I try to adhere to. One is order. I like to kind of make order of our chaotic world, and I think that's a part of what being a photographer is about. Balance is important to me as well, but the third one is depth, and so I tend to use elements that are both close to the camera and further away to give it that kind of three-dimensional feel. And what I'm trying to do is to draw the eye from the object in the foreground to the background. Now, this is not a great example of that, because obviously the subject is very prominent, very large in the background, but the light is behind the subject. Your eye is being drawn to the light, and therefore to those trees in the background.
Yeah, it's a lovely image. Alistair, anything on it?
I'm always blown away by images like this, and it's the bracketing that does it, because when you start out in photography, you think, oh, I'm going to go get a photograph like that, and you arrive at the scene, nice early morning, which will never happen for me, and you take the photograph, and you go back, and you've got a silhouette and a bright sun, and it's understanding that we don't just take the one photograph, that a photographer will go and take several photographs on a tripod, bracketed, and then processed later at home. And a lot of beginners will think this is a one-off, this is a one image, and I think it's good that you do it. It's not going down that rabbit hole, but it's great for beginners to learn as well from that. These aren't just single images.
Yeah, I think the big thing about sort of bracketing is how advanced Lightroom's got. So I remember when I started out with photography, we used to have to use something called Photomatics. And maybe some of the people that are watching this now will remember Photomatics. And it used to produce awful HDR. They were hideous. It looked like computer graphics. It was dreadful, but it was.
The ones that looked like someone had drawn it, didn't they, in crayon?
Yeah, it was amazing. There was almost like there's no tonal definition whatsoever. It's like computer graphics. But Lightroom does a really, really good job. And I mean, this is in some cases, this is perhaps a little bit overdone. The shadows are perhaps a little bit brighter than they would have been normally. But let's not forget that the scene that we see it with our eye, our camera simply isn't able to capture the level of dynamic range that our eye sees. I forget what the eye is, but it's significantly greater than even the Nikons and the Sonys, the cameras that have big dynamic ranges.
Yeah. So the question is it focus stacked as well, or is it just bracketed? Is it a large f-stop number? It looks like it is. No, it's not. No, it looks like a small f-stop.
No.
The flare of the sun.
I don't bracket. I don't stack. I never stack.
Right.
I typically shoot with a wide angle lens. So this is I'm incredibly close to the bell tower in this example. And I find that one of the things that I try to teach the people that I work with is getting closer to your subject. When you're closer to your subject, you get you're so much more intimate with it. You see much more detail in the subject. Light has less distance to travel, so you get better contrast. You notice as you get closer to your subject, you get more contrast. And what as I talk about depth, at the minute you try to get everything front to back pin sharp, you lose the depth of the photograph, because of course the eye is not expecting to see that. So I shoot at f11. I focus predominantly at the hyperfocal distance. So for this, I would have been focused on the ball that's right in front of you, or somewhere around that area. So my foreground is going to be very, very sharp, and my background is going to be what we call acceptably sharp.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
pin sharp, but there's a natural fall off, there's a natural softness to it, and that helps to create a greater sense of depth.
Yeah, F11, that's pretty much all you need, really, in it, because that's getting everything in focus. And as you say, the backdrop just kind of focusing off, it's going off, it's dropping off a bit, and that's what you need.
So I'm just going to say, at 16mm, your hyperfocal distance on a full-frame camera, as near as makes no difference, is going to be about a meter. And that means you're going to be sharp from half a meter to infinity, or acceptably sharp from half a meter to infinity. So focus stacking, in my opinion, and people can shoot me down, focus stacking is something that macro photographers need, that a landscape photographer seems to have adopted for some reason. And in my experience, in the way that I shoot, isn't really necessary.
I think you're right there. I personally been dragged into this focus stacking business, and I've done a few videos where I've done it. I did a Castle Stalker video where I focus stacked about 3 or 4 places, and then when you get back, you realize you don't actually need all of that. And I did use the stacking because I wasn't focusing at the right. I wasn't shooting at the right f-stop, and it's learning that, and it's also learning, as you say, that acceptable focus degradation in the distance. It is acceptable. You don't see it sharp all the way through, and I'd got myself into this. Everything has to be pin sharp from front to back, and there's some of the big photographers out there are really pushing this. Everything has to be sharp front to back, and it's not really the case. And you can allow the background to go out of focus. It's not important to be in focus.
Well, that's it. I mean, if you were actually standing there where Chris was standing, and you're looking at the tower, you know, you're not going to see the back. The background is going to be out of focus. That's the way it is, how your eyes work.
It depends on the subject, I think, as well. Every photograph's different. I mean, in a woodland, I would rather just focus on a few trees and let it drop off, depending if it's kind of a lot of chaos in the background, just to blur it down a bit. But if there's a lot of attention to detail, I would like to get all in. If it's if there was interest there, and it's mainly bringing the interest, what's really in the image that you want to bring forward. But yeah, I agree with you. I do like the idea of not photo stacking too much. That's quite a good idea, actually. We'll go to the next one, guys. That's a lovely image, Chris, and thank you. Chris, tell us more about this shot. Where is it? I think I've got an idea, but just tell where it is about.
Okay. So about 18 months ago, I moved from where I was living on the edge of the Lake District National Park, further into the Eden Valley. So I now live, if you know the area, I live about halfway between Penrith and the town of Alston. And I live on the boundary of an area called the North Pennines Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty. And it's a very, very bleak landscape. Far different from what I'm used to in the Lake District, which is full of potential subjects and dramatic backgrounds. It's basically mile after mile of open grouse moorland, and which means that all of a sudden anything becomes a subject. And if you follow me on Instagram, you'll see, or Facebook, I think I posted a picture of a tractor because today because it's so difficult to find a subject. And this is up in the moorlands, not far from the Hartside Pass, and this is just a sort of a small beck. I think the title of the photo is Unnamed Beck because it's not marked on the OS map, or it's not named on the OS map, and it's simply the subject of the photograph is simply the contrast between the colour of the grasses that's growing in the beck. And the surrounding rougher grasses. It's as simple as that. It's just an S-curve.
Yeah, I do like the colour of the grass. Obviously, the older grass and new grass together, just leading the eye out, and the S-curve come right out to the light in the backdrop. It's really a lovely image, guys.
This is something, Chris, that I'm not familiar with. Is a beck? Is that just like a silted up stream or something?
Beck's just a Cumbrian term for a stream.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is deep in there somewhere a tiny little causeway of water,
which is it's worn all that just over the millennia, presumably.
Yeah, I guess.
I like the
I'm
way
no geologist.
I like the way there's you got the S bend in the foreground, but in the hills in the background, you've got pretty much the Z from the top, then that coming down from the side, from the left hand side, then back along the foreground horizon, shall we say? And so there's at least Z there, just top of that S bend. I like that composition.
Yeah, that's nice.
It's quite an unusual photograph from me because it does kind of break one of my golden rules in that there isn't really a definitive focal point in it. Normally, I like to have a nice subject. There's a focal point where the eye can rest, and we know what we're looking at here. And with this, really, if your eye starts anywhere, it's going to start on the grass in the foreground. It's going to follow it to the background. There isn't really anything there.
But I think the focal point is actually the beck itself.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely.
Those lovely grasses. I love that type of grass. It's great.
Yeah, so you can see the pattern. When you look at the image straight away, the first thing you see is a pattern, the S curve. It's really well done with the light as well. Yeah, Louise, what's your take on that?
It's for me more. I'm with Chris on this. I sound like I'm repeating everything you say, mate. But it's the morning light for me can be softer, can kiss the landscapes so much more than evening light. And it is absolutely, Alistair, worth getting your butt out of bed at silly o'clock and just having the world to yourself. Whereas at night, having just shot flipping starlings at Brighton Pier with about 500 people every day, this is just, the softness of the light is just gorgeous. And for me, the focal point is the sort of 2/3 of the way in, on the back there, with that softness, that light kissing just where that darkness finishes. Just lovely.
Yeah. There's a little image again, Chris, and thank you. That's 2 good images. Yeah, Chris, can you just give I love a starburst. Chris, give us a little bit of introduction to the shot and what time of day it was taken.
So this is another sort of religious subject. I'm not particularly religious, but I kind of am drawn to kind of churches and the history and the age and what have you. Yeah. And this is the village not far from where I live. This is down by the River Eden. This is a place called Eden Hall. And there's a cross that stands separate from the church. I think what kind of really drew me to the scene again was this prominent subject, but the simplicity of the background in this case, and how I was able to kind of quite easily fit the cross in the gate behind it. So that precision of placing that right slap bang in the middle of that gate, is a really important thing for me. I'm a little bit OCD about that sort of thing. It's as with all my locations, I visit them many times, initially to find the subject, then to kind of fine tune the composition, and then really to get the right conditions. And in my head here for this shot, what I really wanted was some kind of really overcast, heavy clouds, something kind of quite a brooding sky. The story behind this cross is that the base is medieval, but the cross is much later because the cross itself was destroyed by iconoclasts. So these people were going around destroying kind of religious symbols. Yeah. And so I felt that was, I was torn between whether that was a positive story or a negative story. I decided it was a negative story that this had been done and that what have you. And so I'd like to use conditions to kind of set the tone of or the emotion that you get from it. And I wanted this to be a much more negative story. But if you've ever tried to do anything in this part of the world, the weather is so difficult to predict at times. Yeah. And I ended up there on an absolutely gorgeous morning, of course, and I just caught the sun rising up behind it. I was very, very lucky to get it star bursting, as it were.
Yeah, definitely, and it's just a nice focal point as well. Just looking at the cross in it, and it's always nice to look at that. I'm quite interested about the history aspect regards to the medieval stone wall, probably before then actually. I mean, I know pretty much as we know, probably the 15th and the 16th and 17th century, regards to the Reformation in Scotland. We had the Reformation, and of course after Anne Boleyn married Henry VIII, a lot of sort of anything kind of popery, they called it back then, was destroyed you know, like cathedrals and things, and any crosses or anything that's pious looking was all destroyed back then. And I just wonder if that was the case.
But it might have been. So definitely, they reckon it was pulled down by people that were rebelling against the church and against religious symbolism. So that's the story behind it as well. But I found that out later. So I think sometimes, when you're kind of researching your subjects, you learn more about it. You find these stories, and those tend to be the ones that I kind of finish when you get that kind of interest in that.
Definitely interesting as well when as photographers, when we get a backstory to our images. I'm big on that as well. So it's an interesting subject, and lovely shot.
You're obviously not scared, Chris, to shoot directly at the sun. We've had a few photographers on here of late who kind of balk at the idea, but you're quite happy just to go for it,
Yeah.
So typically, I guess I'm like most landscape photographers in that I prefer to work with sidelight. So the shot that you saw, the second shot that we were looking at of the Unnamed Beck, that was on a very, very clear day, catching the sun as it was coming off, and I guess it was a little bit more than 45 degrees from the camera, so it's not kind of true sidelight. But I guess with modern technology, it's much easier. I mean, I'm not sure the shots like this would have been possible in the film days.
And was that shot about f11 again, and just kind of let the background drop off a bit?
Yeah. So I mean, I only use two. I only use two f numbers. If I don't have foreground, I'll shoot at f8 because that's the sharpest for my lenses. And if I've got foreground, I'll shoot at f11 and focus at the hyperfocal distance.
Yeah.
Keep it easy. Keep it simple.
Chris, is that a 1635?
Yes, it was. I bought it. I can't remember now how long ago, and it took me 18 months, I reckon, to get the hang of it. I think wide-angle lenses are very, very difficult to use.
Yeah.
And I think the mistake that people make with a wide-angle lens, and the mistake that I certainly made, was I thought wide-angle lenses was so you could fit more stuff in.
No.
But actually, what they're used for much more effectively, as in this case, is just to get you much, much closer to your subject. And that pushes your background away, and it creates that depth.
I'm going to try my Canon 1635 at f11 to try the Sunstar, because I've always just pushed it towards a 16. Just for to kind of get the sharpness of the Sunstar. But looking at there, you've got it, as you say, it's sharp enough, but it also has that softness that that I don't get in my Sunstars. I've got like the in your face kind of versions. I think I need to try that, because the blades do give it a beautiful Sunstar on that lens. Just saying, for all the Nikon shooters in the room here, just saying.
What I like about that shot as well, the fencing, you got the corner of the fence pointing the same, well, with the actual cross with the corner of the fence is, and it's pointing towards the backdrop of the woodland there. It's just kind of aiming out, like pointing out to the back. I do like that. And also, of course, just underneath the starburst. So it's this way, everything's kind of compositionally perfect.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say that. Yeah, I mean, obviously, perfection is something that we never achieve as photographers, but composition is my starting point for everything. Once I've got my subject, composition, I've always put composition before light, before conditions, because I think that's the thing as photographers that we have the greatest control over. And then a shot like this simply comes from returning to a location many times, in different conditions at different times of year, trying different things.
Nice image. I really like that, and we'll get on to the next one there.
Thank you.
Great. Chris, just tell us more about the shot. It's positionally perfectly again with the composition of this position of the sun, the foreground, and the leading out with the both hills and forest, and the left to the right there. It's really lovely balanced.
So this is Ullswater in the Lake District. It was probably my closest lake. And when I first started shooting in the Lake District, I predominantly shot from the edge of the lakes. And as I improved, I moved up into the hills. The beauty of this location, which is Glen Coyne, is there's a National Trust car park literally 20 yards from the point where this photograph is taken. So if you're not very good at getting up in the morning, like Alistair isn't, you can get to this location relatively straightforward. I think it was like half an hour drive from where I lived, easy peasy. And I'm glad you picked this one, Paul, because I think this is a really good example of kind of what it takes for me to get my best photos. So this photograph took me 5 years to produce this photograph. From beginning to end. The process started with composition. So a big part of this shot is the balance of the hills on either side.
Yes.
And it took me a long time to get that right.
Okay.
The second thing is, of course, the position of the sun. So the sun, that is not messed about with in Photoshop. That's as you would have seen it. So there are obviously only 4 or 5 days in the summer and 4 or 5 days in the winter where the sun is going to be in that position. And so the amount of times I went to that location and you didn't see the sunrise because there was a cloud on the horizon, or whatever it might be. So that explains part of it. The other big thing, and the thing that really kind of makes the image, is the rocks in the foreground that balance the composition. And again, creating that depth. And now normally they're not exposed because normally they'd be underwater. And this was a particularly dry end of spring. This is taken. So this is, for those that might want to have a go and have a crack, this is taken on the 1st of May. That's when you get the sun in that location, in that position. The particularly dry Ullswater is one of those lakes where the level goes up and down quite a lot. And I was lucky enough to catch it with those rocks. And I've got another photo, and I don't know, you guys must feel the same. You must have the same thing as well. I've got a photo taken before the sun broke the horizon, and it's brilliant. I love it. It's great. It's blue hour photo. It's almost exactly the same composition without the sun. And under normal circumstances, it would be a portfolio shot. But because this one came 20 minutes later or 10 minutes later, whatever it was, it's never seen the light of day.
Okay.
You can see it's a shot. It's polarization. This one, an exercise in levels of polarization. If I were standing here, I would have to just do so many different levels of polarization just to go back and just think, right, I'm going to study how much I want to see through the water in the foreground as well. Just, I would have ended up taking sort of 6 or 7 shots, and knowing me, Chris, I'd have completely missed everything that was gorgeous about this, just because I'd be fixated on a wrong thing, the level of polarization.
So this will have had a polarizer on it because I rarely shoot without one. But this would have been backed off.
Absolutely.
So that you can't see anything below the surface of the water.
Polarized. This would have been effective shooting straight to the sun anyway, is it?
No, absolutely not. But you'll get awful kind of darkening in the corners, even shooting towards the sun, and you will get very close to the camera. You would have seen that the bottom of the lake.
Yeah, the tones are beautiful.
So we're going to be talking about bracketing earlier. This is bracketed, but there's also grad on here again. So there will be a 3-stop hard grad and probably a bracket of a stop either side of metered.
Yeah, I love the light kissing the sides of the rocks there, the foreground. That's the details of the light kissing the sides of the rocks are really nice. It's well balanced, and of course, it's obviously, you said, you obviously planned that for a while, and you couldn't just rock up and just get the tripod out and shoot that. You can tell it's been well thought of, especially the balance from the left to the right, and also the foreground. It's beautiful.
I was talking to a pal of mine about this. I'm very good friends with Marcus McAdam, who some of you might know from Photography Online. And Marcus is a good friend of mine, and as far as being a professional photographer and a businessman, he's a bit of a mentor for me. And we were talking about this photo, and when I got this shot, there was a kind of feeling of loss.
Okay.
Because although I like the photograph and I'm happy with it, it's in my portfolio. I've never been back to this location because, as far as I'm concerned, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we can improve on it and all this kind of thing, but I will probably work 16, 18, 24 locations at any one time. And so once I get a portfolio shot, that location's retired. And so there was a feeling of loss when I got
this. Yeah, it's just,
do you use if you're planning to go on a particular day, are you using things like photo pills or whatnot to decide, the sun will be in that position on that day and all that kind of stuff, or is it just local knowledge?
No, photo pills or photographer's ephemeris. I use it's almost essential tool for landscape photography. I mean, to a certain extent, success in landscape photography comes from just being in the right place at the right time, and you can't beat that. And so, getting out of bed early, Alistair, and and understanding where the light's going to come from and where you want that, how that's going to fall on the landscape, that comes with experience. That comes with going to a location time and time again. You can't really get that. But there's no point me being here for this shot if the sun is still behind Go Barrel on the left-hand side.
Beautiful.
You say that it's a very common thing to say, being the right place at the right time. But it's a case of you're planned to be there at the right place at the right time. That's the difference, isn't it? And using those apps is a fantastic way to plan that.
Well, it definitely helps, but landscape photography is 10% inspiration and 90% perspiration. And of course, what you don't see, when we were all sitting at this cooing over this image, what you don't see is the multiple failures, for want of a better word, that preceded it.
Exactly.
And you have to go through those. You have to take those.
That's your craft,
how you get to that.
That's your craft, and
that's the job. That's the game. That's
exactly. That's the craft of the job, and that's where the skill comes in, where your talents are shown at. It's a beautiful image. It's well thought of as well. So we'll go to the next one. So Chris, just tell us more about this image. It's I was loving the moss and everything there on this one. So what kind of condition, what kind of light you have there? Was it in the morning?
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. What have you not learned?
This was I'm not a woodland photographer by any stretch of the imagination. Woodland has been my nemesis for many years. I talked earlier about the kind of the aesthetics that I have, and order is one of them, and we know about the chaos of woodland. This was taken on the shores of Windermere, which is a rarely photographed area. Windermere is a big lake, and it's a bit like Loch Lomond in Scotland. It's very difficult to shoot across these massive expanses of water. What you actually want is a bay, and this is just that. This is High Ray Bay on Lake Windermere, and there's you might have the shot. There's a shot of a boathouse that I took, and there's a collection of stones in the foreground. This has become a bit of my MO, and they're kind of pointed in an arrow shape, completely natural. And this, and if you go into my portfolio, you might be able to find that shot. This photograph was taken on the same day as that, and it's the trees that are in the background of that shot. And I spotted it, and it's obviously the subject, if you want, is the arrangement of these trees, the perfect symmetry of these three trees. And it's one of those ones that I spotted it on a previous location. So whenever I go out on, if conditions look good, whenever I go out on location, I typically have an idea of what I'm going to do. I have an idea of the composition that I'm going to shoot, and I will go straight to that. And then I would tend to have secondary compositions that I will then go and finish, or I will do some scouting, try and find something else. So on that morning, I kind of went there, got the shot that I was there for, was very happy with it, but then grabbed this one on the way back. And in some senses, this one is the one I think that has stayed with me longest. I have a kind of deeper affection to it. I think possibly just because of the simplicity of it. There's nothing much to it, is there really? It's just
Yeah, I
three
like to do
trees.
that. I was going to say that actually. It's the three trees, the separation there. Yeah, it's nice. Nice balance to it in the light, of course, just coming in the middle of the trees. You're looking right in the middle of that's your focal point, I can see. Yeah. Guys, any take on that? Do you want us to talk about this one a little bit more?
It's very important to get that the three in your image, isn't it? If it was just two trees, it just doesn't do it right. It's three trees. It's just great, and that is a stunning image where you've got that central tree dead upright, and then the two trees just peeling away very slightly from it. It's just wonderful. It really is.
Yeah.
When we look at a photograph, one of the most important things that we need to understand is how the eye will be drawn throughout that photograph. And visual weight kind of just is the term that we use to describe how the eye is drawn to a particular subject. So if you consider these two trees without the third one in the background, what you have is two trees that have a very similar visual weight, and the eye is not going to be able to distinguish which one of those is the more important. So that creates confusion within an image. The fact that you've got the central tree, which is framed by the others, the closer you are to the center of the frame gives you the more visual weight. That's what it's the rule of odds, I think people call it, but three somethings is the way to go.
It's keeping you in the center, isn't it? It's you're not escaping from the trees at all. You're just keeping right in the center of the frame.
And that's a really important. I think that's a really important element of composition. You really want to try to keep the eye within the frame. You don't want the eye wandering out. So you want to try and keep the edges of your frame as free from distractions, as free from things that are going to pull you away from the center. And if you have a journey or flow through your image, it helps if that flow is through the center of the image.
Yeah,
definitely.
What I do like is the leaves are behind the central tree, not the tree in the distance, but the kind of leaves that tree there. They're quite nicely illuminated, a very bright green,
Yeah.
The light again was coming in from the side on this occasion, so the light is coming behind those trees. So again, and it's not. This isn't a technique I use a lot. It seems like it because pretty much all the shots we've looked at have been bracketed in some way. And again, this is a broken.
Yeah.
I've used brads in there as well, just to kind of pull the eye away. No, because it's quite dark in the foreground as well. So.
I do love a vignette.
That's
so important to have a vignette, and of course, just to keep keep the frame, just to keep your eye where you want to keep your eye. As long as it's not too kind of harsh. But it's lovely balanced. I love the balance of the trees. Really nice. The lichen on the trees as well, and they look like ash trees. I think. I don't think they're oak. Are they oak?
They're English oak.
Oh,
is that English oak? Is it?
Yeah, you can see the leaf. See the leaves on the side.
You can see the leaf.
Oh yeah.
For me, this is I would name this something like wisdom. I don't ever name the shots, but go with it because the bottom of the trees. If you think about an older person's hand, and the time and the experience that you can see in the backs of their hands, it's almost like they're placed down on the floor, and you're seeing experience and wisdom through that. So that's my profound thing for the day. But it just reminds me of a really older person's hands where you can see their life in the back of it.
Yeah,
I like that. I do like that. I don't name my images either. This is titled High Ray Bay Trees.
Nice. and to be fair,
so I tend to. Go on.
So to be fair, sometimes when I come out with stuff like that, there's absolute silence in the room. So thank you for saying I like that, because everyone else just thinks, what's she talking?
No.
I've only just started to name photographs. It's literally, I just have the numbers and that's it. There's only in the last week, to be perfectly honest, that I've actually started to name a photograph. I had a beech tree in amongst a pine forest, and the pine trees were like bars in front of this tree. I just called it caged because it just looked like the beech tree was hemmed in by these bars. And a couple of other shots after that, as I started to name them, I thought, where did that come from?
Yeah,
I don't normally. I'm quite happy just put them out with numbers. Yeah.
it does put. It's good to aim the images, especially in a woodland, because people can see what you're going for in your composition.
Yeah.
I suppose with a woodland photographer, you can't have them all just called trees, can you?
No,
you can,
no.
yeah. Well, you can put the names of the trees and things, and you can do a bit of science to it, whatever. But no, you're better to actually tell the story, what you've seen in the image. That's what I think, and that certainly, this certainly does give a story as well. It's beautiful. I love the root system as well. Looking at the roots, all covered in moss and things.
Hands.
Sorry.
Hands, they're not roots, they're hands.
Hands.
The old person's hands. Were you listening?
All right, sorry, you're talking about but I'm just saying, obviously, more of the scientific point of view, what they really are. But yeah, sorry, I'm just a bit of a tree
Thanks
geek.
for backing me up, boys. I appreciate that.
Sorry, yeah, Louise's hands. So we'll get to the next one.
Not my hands.
We'll keep that in.
Here's your spade, keep digging. Yeah.
So just tell us more about the image and just the thought behind it, etc. It's really nice.
So I used to live on. I used to live in a village called Shap, which is right on the edge of the Lake District National Park. And a lot of people know it because you go past it on the M6 motorway.
I broke down there once. coming downhill, high speed, and the timing belt blew up. So yeah, it wasn't good. It was. Anyway, horse.
So back to horse photos. The boundary of the national park, there's a river, the River Lauver, that runs past Shap, and that's the boundary of the national park. And to the west of that is an area called Ralphland Forest, and it gets the term forest from the old term for hunting ground, not from trees and what have you. You get a lot of kind of deer that come over from the neighbouring valley. But it's another one of these areas. We're so used to seeing the kind of iconic scenes within the Lake District National Park, but this is one of these areas that is never photographed. Never photographed. I've never seen any other photographer, and I only shot there because I live next door to it. This was pretty soon after lockdown, I think, and I was predominantly trying to work as close to home as I possibly could and what have you. So I was really kind of exploring this area. And I don't know if you remember, it was 2020, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The summer we had was beautiful.
Right from the beginning of lockdown, for months it was glorious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I don't really understand the ecology or what the conditions you need in order to get the cotton grass, but the cotton grass that year was amazing.
Yeah.
And I'd gone out to do something with that, and happened upon this fell pony, and this is probably one of the only shots that we'll look at today that was taken handheld, because of course you can't set a tripod up for something like this. The horse would bugger off. So this was snapped handheld. It was also taken on my little Canon M50, which is the camera that I would normally use for filming. But this has been printed big, and it's fine. We worry about the quality of our lenses and the size of our sensor, but this was taken on an APS-C camera with a plastic lens. I think it might be glass. I don't know.
I love the clouds.
Yeah,
I'm a fan of clouds and interesting clouds, and I really like that.
Yeah.
A camera club judge would probably mark this down because the horizon's a little bit too close to the middle of the frame,
center of the screen. Yeah, but you want to show those clouds.
Exactly that. I mean, there is a degree of balance because the texture of the sky kind of helps to balance that.
I mean, you think
For a living bit of that, I call it bog cotton.
Okay.
You call it cotton grass, but the bog cotton is I don't think I've ever seen something where it goes so far into the distance and the depth of it. It's beautiful.
It's an incredible part of the world, and as I say, nobody goes there. But again, it's very similar to what I'm used to photographing now. It's quite devoid of features, and for a photograph, from one of my photographs to kind of work or to be considered portfolio worthy, it has to have that potential subject. It has to have that focal point.
It wouldn't work without the horse there. To be fair,
no.
Yeah, it's a lovely shot, and yeah, just kind of nice, nice. You can stare out for a long time in this image, aren't you? Just looking far and forward together.
Well, I suppose going back on what I said there, if the horse wasn't there, you could go down lower and actually make the cotton a feature, couldn't you? As a
Yeah.
thought.
Different type of shot would that be?
Very much so.
That be more? Yeah. I mean, a gallery. Yeah, I suppose what Doug's saying is you could actually just kind of go down it, and I was kind of miss out probably the hills a little bit there in the background. So there's
You
two
get the
types
cotton on
of
the
shots.
sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Good option.
You could
This is a really interesting shot because this kind of this is kind of more my kind of typical conditions that I'll shoot in. So we've looked at lots of kind of stuff that's bracketed and HDR'd, blended, whatever the term you want to use is.
Right.
But this is more typically the conditions that I will shoot in. So these conditions are probably my favourite, and I think they're massively overlooked by landscape photographers. This is high cloud that is diffusing the sun to the point where it's still casting a shadow, but this shadow doesn't have a hard edge. It's got quite a soft edge to it.
Yeah.
And those conditions for revealing colour and texture are fantastic. And there's another shot that you might want to have a look at here that's taken of the heather with a grouse butt in the foreground. And that's, again, the almost exact same conditions. And it's just that shot's, this shot's all about the colour of the heather. The vividness of the pinks with the yellows and the greens and what have you.
Yeah.
And if you get direct light on that, it loses a lot of that subtlety of tone and subtlety of colour. I just think these conditions, this is what gets me excited, this sort of high cloud that kind of softens that line.
Love the clouds as well in the backdrop there. So yeah, Chris, tell us more about this shot and sort of points of interest in this shot, definitely.
So I think it's for me this photograph is about the story, about the relationship between our beautiful landscape and some of pursuits like shooting that are becoming less and less popular. And this shot was really a commentary about that relationship. And grouse shooting, for a number of different reasons, is becoming less and less popular. It's traditionally was a big part of the Cumbrian economy. Obviously, that's massively reduced now. And I personally, I don't know how I feel about grouse shooting. I grew up. I'm not from Cumbria. I'm from the home counties. I'm from Buckinghamshire, but I grew up in a farming community. So I worked on shoots as a kid, pheasant shoots. I used to beat, pick up, and all that kind of stuff. But I've never had the desire to shoot myself. It's not something that I'm at all interested in. But I do see that relationship, and it's a difficult thing because you can't have one without the other to a certain extent. This is an entirely man-made landscape. This heather is cared for, and it is cared for a purpose. It is for shooting. So if the shooting dies out, what happens to this landscape? I don't know what the answer is, and I think that's the point sometimes of being a photographer. We don't necessarily have to have the answer.
Yeah.
We just have to ask the question, and that's what I was hoping to do with this photo. Yeah,
certainly when you see the say the hide bit there, so they can actually get down and aim towards the grouse. It's it could be kind of people can perceive it in different ways, but nevertheless it tells a story of what's going on in the picture.
It's interesting you said that was cared for, that's the heather, because we've quite a lot in the South Downs National Park. And this year is the first year I've really noticed a significant amount of dead heather. And obviously it doesn't have that beautiful quality that we've got here. And in a way, there's small pockets as you're looking throughout the scene of what I would term as what I'm seeing in larger swathes in the South Downs National Park of heather that's perhaps past it, and the relationship between that element that people may be unhappy with, but the side product is we get such a stunning view of this.
Yeah, it needs to be burnt back.
So I think they banned. I think they banned burning heather, certainly in Cumbria. And I think we were talking about this photo that I posted on Instagram today, or Facebook, the tractor, and that was actually a guy who was up there cutting the heather. So they have to almost mow it, in order to encourage the growth. So and it is it's creating work for that guy. He's an agricultural contractor, so it's a landscape that needs to be managed.
But you can only pay for that guy if you got the sport, the background that brings the money in, and that's the thing. We've got the same problem in Scotland. We've got you got the grouse shooting, pheasant shooting, deer shooting, and so forth. And it's a terrible thing. You're shooting animals and so forth, but the animals aren't going to be there in the first place if we're not shooting them, and the landscape will be completely different as well. I'm just being devil's advocate here. I'm not going to be saying I'm what side of me on, but you're showing that type of that the issues that there are here, which is great.
Yeah,
I don't know how I feel about this. I don't know whether I'm pro or against it. I still haven't gone into it enough. I haven't done my research enough. I understand, it's a very, very controversial subject, and I know a lot of people were very, very passionate about on either side, and I haven't made my mind up.
No.
And I think that's what, again, as I say, I'll go back to that point. Sometimes that's what being a photographer is all about. We don't have to have the answers. Sometimes it's just enough to ask the question.
It's interesting in landscape because normally you get a lot in the street, or obviously kind of any other kind of genre of photography, but in landscape it's interesting to get a response from an image like this. And of course, because landscapes we just shoot like just beautiful scenes, etc. But when you get an image like this, it certainly gets people talking. So it's great. It's good, and obviously it's good for the podcast for people to have their opinions, and we'd like to know their opinions on this image as well. It's a beautiful image, but it certainly gives a kind of a bit of controversy to it, which is quite interesting.
Food for thought, certainly.
Yes, absolutely. So, Chris, tell us more about this shot, and what type of where were you, and of course, and what for example, what time of day, etc. it was. It looks like it's quite a rainy day for some reason. I don't know why I say that.
So this was taken during lockdown, and it was one of those. Lockdown was pretty bad for a lot of people, but it was particularly bad for me because it had only been 6 months beforehand, before lockdown was called, that I made the decision to leave my embarrassingly well-paid job in IT to go and live the life of a penniless artist. And my tenure as a professional landscape photographer started very well, and I had a diary full of one-to-one bookings, and people were coming to the Lake District, and I was doing well. I was doing really, really well. And then, of course, so I left my job. My first day as a professional landscape photographer was the 1st of September 2019. And so it was the end of March 2020 when lockdown was called, and we went. And I always told myself that no matter what happened, I'd always still be able to get out and take photos.
Yeah.
Of course, that was the one thing I wasn't able to do. So not only was I kind of my business wiped out overnight, and when it was kind of my dreams of doing what I loved, but I also wasn't kind of able to get out and do what I would normally do to get over that sort of thing. So we obviously were allowed to exercise. We were on a sort of hour walk, and where I was living at the time, it's an amazing place to walk around, and so I would spend quite a lot. I decided that I wanted to turn a bit of a negative into a positive, and I've always been a colour photographer, but I decided that I was going to use lockdown to help me to improve my black and white photography. So I had a little mirrorless camera. So the first thing that you do is you switch your EVF to monochrome, so that you're looking at the scene in black and white.
Yeah, I hope so.
That makes a massive difference. I still can't say in black and white. I've never got that edge. I think had I not been the product of the digital age, had I started photography when I was younger and gone through black and white and developing my own film, things might have been different. But I can't change that. And so I spent kind of a lot of time kind of wrestling with my emotions or my feelings and what have you. And I, as a bloke, and I'm a bit of a blokey bloke as well. I like beer and I like rugby and and I'm not very good at talking about my feelings and that my wife will tell you that. And I'm a bit of a blokey bloke,
Sure.
And so I found it very, very difficult to understand how I was feeling during lockdown and to express that in words. And I always say, if I'd have been better with words, maybe I would have been a poet. But as I'm not, photography was the thing. And I still cannot explain how this photograph makes me feel. I still do not have the words to express. I don't have the vocabulary. I'm not even sure the vocabulary exists. But every time I look at that photograph, that is what I felt like as a photographer during lockdown. That's how I felt.
I think a lot of people felt that way during lockdown, to be fair.
Yeah, kind of broken.
Broken is a really good word. You guys are sort of putting some good words to it. But I do say that sometimes we simply do not have the words to express our feelings and our emotions. But as photographers, we perhaps don't necessarily need to. We don't need that because we have photography. And this was for the first time I really was able to kind of capture that. And, and it sounds a bit arty-farty, and I'm not an arty-farty photographer. I'm really not. I'm quite practical and pragmatic. And which is why I don't name my photos caged or something like that. I call them. And this is called a tree near Keld. That's what it's called, because that's what it is. But feelings and emotions. That's what photography is all about. It's about trying to communicate at an emotional level with people, and that's why photography is so subjective, because we all experience different emotions. So you're never going to create a photograph that everybody feels the same way about, because we all experience it in a different way. The subjectivity of photography, the subjectivity of art is purely because we have these different feelings.
Yeah, it revokes a response to this image, just like the other one you had just before it. I really do like it. This one, I do like this one better because, you got that kind of that brokenness of the feelings in regards to the aspect, in regards to coming towards, going to lockdown 2020. We all kind of felt that way, as Doug said, but we always have our own personal journey. And but it's something that's not talked about much, I suppose. Everyone talks about the moaning about being kept in, doing this kind of thing, but psychologically, it just kind of broke us. It did broke us because we had our social lives were gone and etc. So this image depicts that kind of feeling, and I can certainly see where you're coming from. You can actually, the image will kind of depict how you feel. So yeah, it's definitely certainly a lovely image.
What I do think is remarkable with this, though, is the wall itself. I mean, this is a dry stone wall, by the looks of it, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Which probably means it's been there since maybe the 17th century, 18th century.
Yep.
Well, still
it's had a tree fall on it, and it's still upright.
Yeah.
They make things to last in Cumbria.
Still standing.
But there's another. I mean, we can't talk about every photo I've done, but there's another photograph there where I've got tonight that's showing a kind of tumbled down wall, and that's another kind of commentary photograph about the state of farming and what have you here in Cumbria. So some of the walls here are thought to be 1,000 years old.
Yes, that's right. I do know the history.
So some of the walls in the Langdale Valleys are that old. And I've got a photograph that was taken not far from Shap, up in the hills there, where you've got a wall that's sort of collapsed as a hole and it's sort of fallen down. It's quite nice, but you can see behind it that they just put a wire fence up behind it, because it's no longer economically viable to repair these dry stone walls in some of these areas. It's just much cheaper to go bang, 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 stick a line of posts in.
They don't have the knowledge.
And so that photograph is up. Say again?
So they don't have the knowledge anymore. In a lot of cases to repair these walls.
That's right. They do teach sort of dry stone walling in some of the colleges and what have you here, but it is dying out, and there's less and less people doing it, so it's difficult to get the people to do it. You can actually go and do a course at the weekend to learn to anyway, I digress. And that's that photograph again. It's similar conditions. It's these kind of bright overcast conditions that I like to shoot in. But it's that commentary about So I don't want to end on a little bit of a downer, but I do sometimes feel that in landscape photography, often we're all saying the same thing: isn't the world a wonderful place? And I have drawn a little bit more to other issues,
slightly darker corners.
Yeah,
maybe slightly darker corners, but I think for many of us, landscape photography is a form of escapism, and we get away from. When I used to work in IT, I was a very senior engineer, and I couldn't switch my brain off. I was always solving problems. I solved problems at the dinner table. I would solve problems last thing at night. I'd wake up solving problems. And the only way I could switch my brain off was to go and stand on a hill on my own with a camera. And photography is so absorbing that you can't think of anything else.
Yeah.
And it's like a form of meditation. It's like a form of meditation for
me. Yeah, absolutely.
But that's, and of course, largely gone from me now.
Yeah, what I'll say, Chris, as well, we will actually put some more images up at the end of this for our viewers to see, because there's some stunning ones we'd like to, with your permission, of course, at the end of the video, we'll edit these in, and especially when you spoke about a similar one to this one. So, guys, we are almost at the end, and I just want to say thank you to Chris for giving up his time tonight. We've really enjoyed, and we've got, I must admit, you articulate your images very well, how you speak about them, and it certainly gives food for thought. Because I think there's a parallel there, because when I go out in the forest and I take images of trees, I try to find a reason to take an image, not because of the composition more, it's more actually to do with the story. And I don't know, that's a bad thing in the photography aspect, but I like to see something there that I enjoy and that it means something to me. You did mention, of course, as well, just to summarise, that you can't really talk about, feelings as much, and you kind of transport that through your images. I felt that was quite interesting as well, because I think you're not the only person. I think a lot of us feel that way. So I think people can certainly identify to that this evening and watching this podcast. But thanks, Chris, and really enjoyed, and of course, just going over a few things with the guys, putting their little bit in as well. Some great questions, guys, and thanks for asking Chris these questions. Chris, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
Would you come back again onto the podcast?
Yes, of course I will.
Great. We would just like to keep in touch with everyone we asked to come on, and in some capacity we'll let you get on. That'd be great as well.
See you next week then, Chris.
Yeah. We are quite a young YouTube channel, but we are going the right direction. That's the good news. And we're just trying to just get people to say yes, so we can actually do little kind of different things on the podcast, mix up a little bit, maybe get news guys on to critique images, and just help the photography community and help people watching who are enjoying to start photography. That's what it's all about. Photography community is there to be helped, to help other people, help each other, of course. So, guys, thanks again for watching the Landscape Photography Podcast. And as ever, Doug and, of course, Alistair and, of course, Louise, thanks for coming on. And a huge thank you to Chris Sale. Chris, it's been a real pleasure speaking to you. Thank you again. And please keep in touch. We really enjoy your work. And I will be putting some of your social links below this video for people to look at, especially your workshops as well, which I will, of course, let people know more about how it's so important to see your go into your ventures and how you actually go out and take images, and so people can get a good insight as what you do as a photographer. Of course, that's what you said on your website as well, just trying to coach people, etc. So guys, thanks again, and do have a good evening, and we'll see you on the next one next Friday, where we'll have a team cast that next one, and it's just mainly just the guys putting up their images, good or bad. I'm sure it'll be fine. Well, I mean,
Gosh.
that's a bit harsh, I know. And Darren, we'll all show Darren's images this time. That's another story. And Chris, as ever, thanks for coming on. Have a good evening and enjoy your photography week as well, whatever you're all doing. Take care.
Take care.
Bye, guys.
Night, night.
Bye now.
Night, night.
Bye.